I'm Kira Cleveland, and this is Human Intelligence. With my co-host, Ned Hayes, we talk about the importance of human creativity in the age of AI. Welcome to the future.
Welcome to another week of the Human Intelligence Podcast. Today we have Delfina Homen. She is an intellectual property litigator and has represented clients from diverse industries in lawsuits involving patent, trademark, and copyright infringement and trade secrets. Delfina is experienced in IP procurement and enforcement and has worked on numerous trademark and patent applications, assisting clients in obtaining the IP protection they need to grow and support their business strategies. We're happy to have you here on the show today, Delfina, and to talk about the state of the world in terms of artificial intelligence and intellectual property. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to having a wonderful discussion today.
Absolutely. And so to kick it off, what is the state of affairs with generative AI and IP?
So, the state of affairs is very much in flux. We are in a very interesting time right now, at least for litigation dorks like me, because we saw a number of suits get filed in about 22 to 23 on AI and copyright implications as far as the use of AI goes, more so in the training side of the AI and actually training the platforms using copyrighted works. And we're now starting to see some pretty major decisions coming out of those cases because the courts move much more slowly than AI does. And so now we're starting to see some really big decisions coming out. And we're starting to see a new line of lawsuits that I've been forecasting for a while get filed as well. So it's a very interesting time.
Yeah, it is an interesting time. And just to set a baseline here, let's define some terms. What is copyright? What kind of ownership rights does it give you?
Yeah, so copyright protects creative works that are fixed in a tangible form. And that can be everything from a doodle on a notepad in, your office to an amazing work of art to an email if it has enough creative content to it, to a book, to a song. We even have copyright for things like buildings, architectural designs, music, dances, choreography is copyrightable. So it's a constitutional right that we all have to secure, or it's constitutionally granted IP right, and that we want to encourage creativity by allowing people to have a monopoly for a certain period of time over their creative works. And having a copyright means that you have the exclusive right and ability to copy it, create derivative work. So say you write, or say you take a picture and you want to have it turned into a painting, you have the right to do that as the copyright owner. And somebody, if they would like to paint your picture, has to get permission from you to do so. So there's a whole bunch of different rights that a copyright provides. We talk about it as being a bundle of sticks, but yeah, copyright, just generally speaking, protects creative works.
Which we are grateful for. Many
Yeah.
good uses there. And just for the audience, and to be clear, when you create something with AI, can you claim copyright on that creation?
So far, the answer to that is no. And it's been a very interesting couple of years in that vein. There was a gentleman who created a platform and then attempted to claim copyright in a work that the platform generated. And the Copyright Office told him no because the work was generated by AI. And he appealed it, and the appellate court told him no because the work was created by AI. And then he appealed it further, and the court said, no, really, seriously, authors under the Copyright Act are human beings. They are not machines. And therefore, a work created by AI, exclusively by AI, is not copyrightable. Where we start to get into the it depends world that the lawyers live in is if there has been sufficient human interaction in that creation process, then it may be copyrightable. But even there, the Copyright Office is really struggling. So, for instance, if you were to theoretically give, say, 100 different prompts to an AI platform to generate a very, very specific type of work, you would try to say, well, look, I told the AI what to do. I used it as a machine. It's kind of like taking a camera, setting it up, picking the angle, picking the lighting, picking the filter, picking the focus length, and therefore I should have a copyright in the work that camera created for me. The Copyright Office is still kind of taking an interesting approach here where it's like, well, unless you tell AI to do every single explicit thing that it sticks out, there's still going to be some gaps that AI is filling in. And as a result, we think that AI was involved in it and therefore it's not copyrightable. That's just the Copyright Office. There are appeals, there's decisions that are cases that are handling this that may say otherwise. One of the areas that the Copyright Office does agree may lead to copyright protection for AI created works is if there's enough human involvement with the output. So say you get an image of two cats drinking coffee as your output from your AI. Decide, well, actually, I think I'm going to have it be three dogs playing poker. Maybe that would be copyrightable because you're taking different things that came out of the AI, you're repositioning them, you're creating essentially another work by human engagement. So we're saying it's not just the machine creating it. But as far as like a down and dirty AI created it, no. We don't have an author because a machine created it and authors have to be human under the Copyright Act. And so there is no copyright owner.
All right. So we still have some definitive space to stand on right now, but it's definitely an interesting world. It sounds like, like
Yes.
ever evolving. And so what we understand is generative AI is based on the work of human creators, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
So
absolutely.
okay, so technically all of the larger language models need human content to function, correct?
That the models that we see now absolutely were trained on human works. In some platforms are actually building off of what they output. And so then the question becomes, okay, well, how much of it is actually training on human created work and how much of it's training on AI created work? But the basic principle is yes, the platforms that are out today were trained on human created works.
Well, so I'm an author and I have several books that have been published, and some of them ended up in a database called LibGen, which have been used by Meta and by other companies to train their large language models. So I'll just ask kind of a leading question. Did these companies get that IP from me and other human authors through legal means?
If they did not procure it with a license and it came from a pirated website, a pirated database, then no, they did not. And I think you're leading me into the Anthropic decision.
Well, sure. Let's go there. Tell us about the Anthropic lawsuit. What happened? Like the lawsuit happened, and now it's in settlement. But could you walk us through the stages of that lawsuit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Anthropic decision actually involved a class action of authors who sued Anthropic, which is an LLM, for its training that was done with their copyrighted works without their authorization, was the class's claim. And the reason why it's been hitting the headlines so much for the last few months is because it was one of two decisions we have now from the same court, from two different judges taking two different approaches as to whether training an LLM with somebody's copyrighted works is not actually copyright infringement because it's fair use. The judge in the Anthropic case did hold that using copyrighted works to train LLMs was fair use because his approach was that, well, it's highly transformative. And that's a very important factor when it comes to fair use is how transformative is the use that's supposedly fair or not. And he also didn't believe that it impacted the market for the original works, which I find to be a little dubious of a finding. But he did express skepticism that pirated works could be used to train LLMs as a fair use. It was an interesting question in the Anthropic case because the Anthropic built some of its LLM off of actual works that it had purchased and then trained the material or trained its LLM with, but it also had a whole database that was pirated works. And Judge Alsup said, well, that might not be fair use.
Right. So one thing that I've heard from people who are defending generative AI systems and large language models is that a system that's digesting or ingesting the mathematical model of words on the page is just like a human being licensing and reading a book. And it seems like the judge kind of bought part of that. And I would argue as an author that they are wildly different things. Building a mathematical model is different than the tears or laughter I might have in reading a book. I'm curious if you have any legal perspective on that difference, if there is a difference legally.
I don't know if there is a difference legally. I think it's kind of an interesting world that we're in right now because to me, it harkens back to a case that's quite old now. The Supreme Court's decision in Sony, which was, God, 80s, I believe, maybe into the 90s, but started off in the 80s. And, Sony released a little thing called the VCR.
Hmm.
And people got very upset by that because it allowed people to make copies, television programs, movies that were being aired. And the idea was, well, that's copyright infringement. And the courts kind of found a way out there by saying, well, it's fair use, it's time shifting. And so therefore it's not infringement. And to me, it almost feels, and this is more of a personal opinion than it is a legal opinion, it almost feels like finding that AI is learning like a person learns from reading a book and that somehow is transformative is a bit dubious. I'm still personally struggling with just how transformative is it really to take somebody's work without their authorization, train your model on it, and make a whole bunch of money. But that's kind of more of a personal opinion than it is a legal opinion. It kind of feels like the courts are trying to find a way to find fair use. And, the two decisions, we have the Anthropic decision and the Meta decision. The two decisions that are dealing with fair use in this space right now are just that. They're two decisions from two district court judges. They're not even from the Court of Appeals, much less the Supreme Court. So we are far from the final say on whether this is or is not fair use. I think that probably the courts will try to find a way to have AI be supported by fair use simply because we don't have anything in the Copyright Act that really
Mm.
supports AI. And AI is good for business. And I think in this country, we are always going to do things that are good for business. We're always going to try to find a way. So again, more personal opinion than legal opinion, but
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
but we appreciate you sharing it, and kind of along those lines of what's good for business. um, what do you think about the settlement with Anthropic as far as is it fair to the Authors Guild members?
Yeah, I think that it's fair from a perspective that at least they're getting something, but you can't unring a bell. And somebody already took their works without their permission, trained the platform on it. One of the judges in this did believe that there was an impact on the Meta decision. He did believe that there was an impact on the market for the original works because the output could compete with the original works.
Right.
Yeah. And so, say somebody wants a romance novel and they don't want to pay for a romance novel. And instead, they want to pay for the one that, Chat GPT or whatever output instead. Or they wouldn't even pay, they would just take it. That's impacting the work for the original, the marketplace for the original work. So I think that from that perspective, it's fair that they're doing something to try and make them as whole as they can. Of course, the question mark being in a lot of those cases, is it the publisher that's getting it? Is the author getting it? Are they getting a realistic portion? Is it making them whole for what's already been done? And whenever you are the copyright owner and you don't get to control how your work is used in a manner that really can't be undone, this is not like a typical copyright infringement situation where, say, somebody's infringing your materials on their website and the court can say, take it down. Great, we fixed the problem. You can't just take this down. It is there. And short of scrapping the entire platform, I don't know how you unring that bell. So I think
Hmm.
from that perspective, again, more of a personal opinion that it's not necessarily fair.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's interesting with the not being able to unring the bell, right? And so it is good that they got something, but what might have happened if the settlement hadn't happened?
Yeah. So the reason why the settlement happened, we're all like, oh my goodness, $1.5 billion. They were on the hook for over $1 trillion in damages trial. That's why the
Mhm.
settlement happened. And I think if you had seen something like that, you know, the platform could have been completely out of business and the authors could have ended up with nothing. So, you get something. There's always something in a class action. And at least here it's anticipated it's about $3,000 per pirated work, which is fairly in line. And that was actually one of the reasons why Judge Alsop was not signing immediately off on the settlement and wanted to really see what the details of it were, because he wanted to make sure that it was like somewhat in line with what a typical statutory damages award would have been in a case like this. So, it's not like most class actions where the person who gets signed up for the class action, whether they know it or not, gets, $20 in a coupon, but it's still questionable in my
Hmm.
opinion.
Yeah. So that's one major lawsuit that you've unpacked for us. Right now, it looks like there's about 50 different lawsuits wending their way through the court system. I mean, OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, Google, all these companies have all of these lawsuits headed towards them. Do you think there's going to be some kind of major reckoning where US law is going to be changed to either accommodate them or to set kind of guardrails? Because right now it's been the Wild West and things are going to change, right?
Yeah. My hesitation about change on a governmental level is governmental change for anything is very difficult these days. And even in the best of times, it's incredibly hard to get a major overhaul to a law like the Copyright Act, which I think requires a major overhaul in order to effectively address the competing concerns. AI is a useful tool and used for good, it's a very good thing. But whenever it's undercutting creativity, that's a problem for the creators and it's a problem for people who want to see human created works. I know I see it all the time on social media. People are like, oh, that's AI, that's crap, and I think people still really want to see human created work. So there's definitely work that needs to be done, but I think you have to stop and think about that it's 2025. And the last major overhaul of the Copyright Act, setting aside things like the DMCA and whatnot, but the last major overhaul of the Copyright Act was in 1976. So I don't think we're going to see anything change legislatively anytime soon. Where I think the change is going to happen is more in industry itself. I think that the markets are going to change to handle this because I think that, you're already seeing a little bit of it where collectives are forming to license works for training purposes. There was one announced earlier this year where the Copyright Clearance Center, UK's copyright licensing agency, is trying to put out a license as well so that authors can actually license their material for generative AI training purposes so that they actually do get a cut. Plus, the platform gets to know, hey, my work is being used by my permission, not just like randomly stolen from me. I think that it's going to be industry that fixes it because lawsuits are expensive and uncertain. And it's better for everybody if we can find some sort of a way commercially to handle this when I think the courts move way too slowly. And the truth of the matter is that the law that underpins all of this doesn't support AI. It just doesn't. It predates it significantly and it can't handle it.
Yeah, well, and things are getting interesting. It's bubbling up in all sorts of ways. And, we talked about text and some generative AI that was sort of obvious, but I'd really love to bring up and get your perspective on the AI actress that's causing a lot of buzz. Tilly Norwood was out there. Right now there's actually posts that are identifying the person she was trained off of and that the AI actress has 90% likeness to this person. And what's interesting is how in Denmark they now granted people ability to own the copyright to their face and their body. What do you think about that concept, and how do you think we need to adapt to that as well?
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. And I think that it brings up another issue that really I don't think is bubbling up too much in the courts, at least not in the US just now. It's the very hot button is copyright. But we have rights of publicity issues with AI as well. I regularly speak to educational bodies and persons about AI and copyright and just AI policy in general and talk about deepfakes. And
Yes.
deepfakes are actually a very significant problem. Our president, I don't think you can really call it a deepfake. It's pretty obvious. It's a joke, but just recently posted AI videos of Hakeem Jeffries wearing a sombrero with Mexican music being played behind him. And if you didn't know better by the context of the posting, perhaps you could think that Hakeem Jeffries really did play with a mariachi band and had the music behind him. I think that it's a little bit different when you come to famous people. The right of publicity requires a lot more to be violated. But I think that we definitely have privacy issues when it comes to AI and using people's image, name, likeness within AI training, because you can have output that significantly mimics an actual person. And, that person, if they don't give their authorization for it, I think could state a claim for violation of their right of publicity. And that's an interesting thought too, because the right of publicity is different state by state, Case in point, Washington has a lovely statutory law covering it. Oregon has a case from like 1967 that says, yeah, we might recognize something vaguely like that. So it's very different state by state.
Wow, it changes that much. So it's a complicated terrain we're in where the law is unclear and it's also defined differently in different places, not even in different countries, but also different states, right?
Yep, absolutely. Copyright is because it's a constitutional right, it's the same state to state, it's a federal right. And if there is any state law that tries to step in where copyright is, it's preempted. But that's not the same for right of publicity. Name, image, likeness is a state by state thing.
Fascinating.
And the rights of privacy are state by state too. We have tried for a few years now to have federal privacy rights, and that's not looking like it's going to be a thing anytime soon.
What do you think will happen with human IP and generative AI companies in the future? How do you think this is going to evolve?
So I think that, again, I think that AI is a very useful tool. I think it's just like, we're kind of sitting in the same place that I imagine people were about 50 years ago whenever personal computers broke onto the scene. It's like, oh my gosh, computers are going to replace all of us and we're going to all lose our jobs. And now all of us sit on a computer all day long and use it as a tool. I think that AI is a tool. It will be used as a tool. I think it's a more robust and potentially challenging tool than computers are, just, generally speaking. But I think that it can do some really fantastic things. It can speed up processes that humans might take, weeks or months to do. It can do it in a day. And I think that's an incredible thing. But I think that we are always going to, as humans, have a thirst for human creativity. I don't think that's going anywhere. I think that AI versus human created is going to become akin to, you can go to Walmart or you can shop local. And, there's going to be people who don't really care and will go to Walmart or will use the AI. And there's going to be people who intensely care about supporting artists, making sure that their works are human created, and they're going to seek out those human created works. So that's where I personally think it's headed.
Got it. Well, we'll see what happens, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So, last but really important question for us. As you know, we're in the business of certifying genuine human intellectual property and human creative acts. In fact, you've worked with us to understand the potential for this kind of business. So, I'm curious, why do you think this approach of identifying genuine human stuff might be important and useful?
I think, again, because people want to know, just like they want to know where their food is coming from or who created the clothes that they're wearing. I think there's going to be a market for people who want to know where their works are coming from. Right now, AI is, still fairly in its infancy. And I think it's fairly easy to see when something is AI. I used to, in my presentations I was giving a couple years ago, I would always throw up a picture of somebody with a messed up hand as a typical AI hallucination, and how you can just look for the hands. And if you see a hand with 6 fingers, it's AI. But AI is getting better. And so now AI
Hmm.
knows that hands have 5 fingers. So it's getting a little bit harder to look at a work and say, is that AI or is it not AI? And I think as AI continues to improve, which it's going to continue to do, and it's going to continue to do at an exponential rate, it's going to get harder and harder to just be able to look at something and determine if it's AI or not. And I think people are going to want to know what the source is of a painting, of a picture, of a book, of a song. They're going to want to know that a human came up with that, because I think at the end of the day, we are all very protective of humans, and nobody wants to let the robots win. So I think that there's going to be an intense value for services like yours that help consumers understand what the source is of their creative works. Plus, there's value for the creators themselves, because they can say, look at me. I am human. I have created a human work. You can trust that what you're getting from me is human. And I just think that it's an amazing thing that you guys are doing. I'm super excited to be a part of it, even, just as your lawyer. And I think that this is the kind of thing that helps us figure out how to make AI work for everybody going forward.
Really appreciate that and that statement and working with you. I'm so grateful that we have people like yourself who are navigating this incredibly complex terrain and also can articulate and help guide people through it so proficiently and so clearly. So thank you so much. We're grateful that we get to share your expertise with the world, and it's been great having you.
Been great being here. I appreciate it.
You can find out more about any of these news items and hear the complete interview on the extended premium version of our podcast at humanintelligence.news. Today's episode was produced by Ned Hayes and engineered by Mohammed Adnan. Our analog-only human-themed music was created for the Human Intelligence podcast by Josh Pinkston of Nature and Spirit. This episode, and every episode, is brought to you by the Human Intelligence Institute team. That's all for Human Intelligence. Thanks for listening to today's episode. As always, this episode is available online at humanintelligence.news.